Next, I'd like to invite Congresswoman Jaime Herrera Beutler, the first Hispanic in history to represent Washington State in the House of Representatives. Improving birth outcomes for mothers and children is a key priority of hers and led her to help launch the bipartisan Caucus on Maternity Care. She's also the sponsor of the Preventing Maternal Deaths Act, an effort to improve the quality of health care received by mothers. Welcome, Congresswoman. Bob, over to you.
Hi, Congressman. Thanks for joining us. Please take a seat. I first want to start by, as we're doing research on the questions we ask, and I had never heard of really the incredible story about your daughter. Can you reveal that story? Because it's quite telling and very apt for today.
Well, so I had waited until I was into my second re-election, right? You're supposed to get through your first re-elect. My husband and I were newly married, wanted to have our first kid, and went till she was about 5 months, and then announced, right, she was pregnant. And then about a week, 2 weeks later, I went in for my anomaly scan, which the doctors in the room or the midwives will know what that means. Basically, they checked, you know, they're just checking to make sure everything's okay, and we were told your baby doesn't have kidneys. And I had no idea what that meant. Come to find out, kidneys produce the amniotic fluid. The amniotic fluid is what, in utero, is what causes the lung development. So if you don't have it, your baby's lungs don't develop. And so, you know, your baby gets squished. About 30% of them miscarry. If they are born alive, they can't breathe. So it was a 100% fatal diagnosis, and that was my firstborn. I should tell you though, fast forward to today, I was trying to get her dirt cups ready because they're celebrating the summer birthdays right now, and so I was like trying to get them out. She's heading off to school this morning, and getting her swimsuit. It's a water day, so I was a little bit late, but she's amazing. She's a miracle. God gave me an actual miracle with her. But the great thing with this is it's not a one-time deal. There are now other babies who've lived because of what she went through. And it wasn't high tech, it wasn't radical. What I found is it was getting physicians who are willing to try. And that's, you know, we're gonna talk a lot about disparities, I assume, and yep. It's not just race, although it is certainly an issue with race and gender and class and region. I've also found that there are certain biases against babies in utero who have pre-existing conditions.
So how was your daughter saved?
So well, after getting kicked out of more than one OB practice, because I was just pushing, man. I just said, you got to do this, you got to do this. Someone's got to try putting fluid in my womb. Like a reverse amniocentesis. Like, there's no fluid, put some in there. And everybody said, we don't do that, we don't do that, we don't do that. Expectant management, which is wait and let the baby die, or termination. I said, well, I don't want to do that. She's alive, she's moving, I can feel her. I'm not going to end her life. And they said, well, we can induce. And I said, well, when do you want to induce? And they said, well, like now. This was at 22 or 23 weeks. And I said, no, and so that's why I got kicked out of a clinic or two. So we moved along, and actually a parent who saw my story got a hold of somebody who knew me, because I was getting a lot of information from all over the world at this point, and said, you got to go. My son had something similar. We found a doctor who was just willing to try, and that's all I wanted, right? The right to try. Right. And there was a doctor up at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. I got in for my first appointment, and we basically got her. She did a diagnostic ultrasound, so she put fluid in the womb, because, you know, a picture, an ultrasound is like a picture. And if you don't have the fluid, it's like a picture in a dark room. So I said, you got to put the fluid in, you got to turn the lights on to tell me for sure there are no kidneys. And she was like, she said okay, but she was pretty sure there were no kidneys. But when we did that, we watched on ultrasound as she opened her mouth and she started to breathe in the fluid, and her little baby lungs started to pulse. And you can't tell that the lung development is happening, but the fact that she was practice breathing was a good sign. And I think that was what caused her to say, well, and she did say this, she said, at first she said, we're not gonna treat you with serial infusions. And I was like, okay, just give me the one. And then once that whole thing happened and she saw that, you know, the theory is sound that this could work, right? It hasn't been tested in a long time. There's no path. She had to chart her own path. But it was sound, and so she was willing, and she said this, if Johns Hopkins isn't willing to do this, where are you gonna go? And so they moved forward, and I remember there were times I go up, so I'd fly in, I'm a West Coast member, and I'd get up really early and drive to Hopkins to try and beat traffic, get an infusion, then drive back to get here before votes or I'm on a PROPS or on committee. And, you know, we did this over a course of a number of weeks. And there was no proof for, you know, but I knew God was going to give me this baby. And I knew it was going to open doors for other kiddos. And it has. And so fast forward, she came early. My recommendation is don't have a 28-weeker. But I also will say 28-weekers live just fine. 24-weekers, we were in the hospital in a NICU, you know, there's an advanced level NICU, but we were in a NICU with other 24-weekers who went home well before we did. These babies are breastfeeding, they get their eyes checked, make sure they're good to go, and they go home. It's remarkable where we're at today. I have again though, the regionality of it makes such a big difference. You know, I've walked through this with other moms. I get moms who call me from all over, right? And they say, oh, it is why I'm committed to changing this, quite frankly. I have moms who call me from rural southern states or northern states who are poor, dirt poor. So they're on Medicaid. And there's not a doctor in their state who will give them an infusion. And so I know about 4 or 5 doctors in the nation, and I literally am like, how do we get you to here? So we've been, you know, you try and piece it together. I've had a lot of fun, not threatening, but having good conversations with insurance company CEOs about, I mean, you know, just recommending strongly, right?
Yes.
And they come around. You know who doesn't usually come around is freaking, Medicaid. I have a hard time with this because just because you're poor doesn't mean you should get second-class care. And so these moms, I've had a mom who got a hold of me. So in Congress, you have to email your own rep, and so you have to put your address in when you do the email, right? This smart little cookie, she was poor and single, and I think she was African-American. I think she said that, because I get a lot of emails about this, a lot of emails asking for help. But she said, you know, no one in my whole region will treat me. And I just want what you got. Can you help me? And I thought, oh dear Lord, she's on Medicaid. How am I going to get Medicaid to break down that barrier and get her to one of these other centers? Get her up to Hopkins, get her down to Stanford Children's, get her to Baylor, you know, get her to Colorado Children's, get her to Dallas. There's certain centers where I know the doctors will do it. Just about any center can do it. It's whether they will is the issue. And so, you know, I feel like, so what we've gone through, you know, Abigail's got a full adult life ahead of her. I laugh, like I'm like, Kim Jong-un, she's got nothing on her. Like my goal is like benevolent dictator. Like we're like, I was sitting with her on the floor one day because she loves to go. She knows most of my colleagues, because they all walk through that with me. And she was like, so she just holds court, like Steny Hoyer, high-fiving, she knows everybody. And we're sitting there one day, and you know how your names light up on the board when you're voting?
Yeah.
And she said, hey, Mom, where's my name? Because I was showing her my name. And I said, well, honey, you got to run for office, right? You got to run for office if you want your name up there. And she goes, I want to run for office. And I was like, okay. And she goes, I go, so, hon, what office are you going to run for? And she goes, yours. All right, so look out.
That could be quite a primary.
Yeah, be toast. I'd be toast.
They would make news. I wanted to ask you, we were talking earlier about your legislation. It has 137 co-sponsors.
Very excited about it.
Can you describe it a little bit, and can it pass? Have you talked to leadership about it?
Yeah.
What's the future for this bill?
Oh, it's gonna pass. Details. I have actually gotten a commitment from my leadership that they're going to schedule it for a floor vote before August.
Really?
Yeah, I'm in the trust but verify camp, so nobody, if you're helping us advocate for this, don't let up. We have 130 co-sponsors, which is fabulous, but we still need more. The more we can get, the better.
Sure.
And here's the thing with this. So the bill is the maternal, well, there's a whole name to it, but basically what we're doing is setting up maternal mortality review committees in each state. Some states have them. But not all states are sharing the same information. They're not collecting the same data. So we're going to standardize it a bit and allow for a national collection. We provide just enough money so everybody can do it. It's not going to break the bank, but it's going to give every state the opportunity to investigate every maternal death. Oh my goodness, we are the highest in the industrialized world. In fact, our maternal mortality is higher than Iran or Lebanon or Turkey, right? That's ridiculous. And when you break the numbers down, it's so heartbreaking. So I think our aggregate number is about 26.5 per 100,000 live births, 26 women die, right? Among African Americans, it's closer to 40 per 100,000 live births. In certain regions, it's even worse. In New Jersey, the number I saw last night was about 79 per 100,000. So don't be an African-American woman in New Jersey giving birth, and I'm going to get in big trouble for saying that. But the reality is we have some major problems to fix. That is ridiculously unacceptable in 21st century America, period, right? Interestingly, though, it's not all just whether you're, so I said class disparities, racial, gender, regional, even Hispanic women, though are around the same poverty level as African-American women, they don't have the same, they're not seeing the same mortality rates. So the reason we need this bill and these committees is to investigate, because it's going to be, I think it's going to be a different solution depending on where you're at, quite frankly. I think there's no broad brush, there's no one size fits all. That's why we have to investigate every single one of these deaths and then get that data to the national level so we can break it down and really, I know there are going to be folks in this room who know there are some certain, right, increasing rates of C-section, right? Health risks, access to care. If you're in rural America, I think it's less than 50% of the time you're going to have access to prenatal care or postnatal care. That's within 30 minutes, right? So you're driving a long time, and how many women are going to have the opportunity to drive for an hour, 2 hours plus to go to a prenatal appointment or a postnatal appointment? And I think this bill's going to get us that information to stop this. We continue to go the wrong direction. Our rates of mortality continue to climb. It's getting worse. It's insane.
So how do you see the path? Okay, you've been promised a floor vote before the August recess.
Trust but verify.
Yes, and do you see this being attached to the omnibus? Do you see it as a standalone bill?
I don't know.
Okay.
My ability to game out what's going to happen politically has changed so dramatically in the last 2 years. Like, whatever, I don't care. Just give me the shot. Mm-hmm. I think there is legislation moving in the Senate, so this has stands an awesome chance of being signed into law. And I honestly, I'm not so worried about whose vehicle it is. If we can get it, right?
Getting to the president's desk.
Anybody who's listening who's in a higher up position than I am and wants credit for it, take it. Take it. It's all yours.
We've got a few minutes left, so we can open up for questions. If you can identify yourself and then ask your question in the back there.
Thank you. Katie Schubert with the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine. Thank you, Congresswoman, for being such a champion for maternal and child health. One thing that you said that sort of struck me was this idea as you're telling your story that you were really truly an advocate for your own health and your child's health. And so from a provider perspective, I think we're all working together to try to get this bill passed. But once we do, and we figure out kind of what's happening, how can we all kind of come together to support consumers so that they can also be advocates for their own health?
So this is an issue I think spreads across America right now, right? Owning your own health care. So there's the issue of having the access, there's the issue of understanding what you've got, and then there's really owning it. And each one of those, right, we could do a whole symposia on. And I think that's where you all come in, whether you're advocates, whether you're community groups, whether you're the physicians. My experience was, it was a fellow parent. And actually, every step of the way, I think about the challenges, the joys of breastfeeding. Oh my gosh, I could do a book on where I've had to pump as a working mom. It's horrific. But I spoke to a group last week about this, and there's some great advances being made there. But I think for me, it was happenstance. It was coming into contact with the right parents who had information and who encouraged me. I didn't know that we could fight for her until a dad said, hey, call this doctor. Because every doctor said no, and doctors know what they're talking about, right? I'm not a doctor. Everybody said no, 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 no. And then this one dad said, well, it might not be no. And so my journey has been, and that's what I've tried to be for other moms, is how do we help you to yes? Well, this one said, how do we get you to another one? Where do we get you to run out the course that you need to run out as the parent? And so I think for you, especially physicians, nurse midwives, doulas, residents, for crying out loud, the residents they're your lifeline sometimes. I think it's hard for the physicians because they've got so much going on, whether they're thinking about getting, you're getting care, you're having to deal with a lot of people, right? You've got a high caseload, there's probably med mal in there somewhere in this space. How do we free you up to be able to really care for the person is part of this, I think.
How many pregnant women contact you for help?
Oh, I've had a lot. I don't have a final number. I mean, we're probably up to, it comes in spurts. It's about every 3 months, and it's usually 3 or 4 every 3
From
months.
all over the country?
Sometimes international.
Wow.
Yeah, because you get online and you Google bilateral renal agenesis or Potter's syndrome. And when I did it, all I saw was pictures of dead babies. Now when people do it, they see pictures of my daughter. And that, we made a conscious decision, like, I don't want to throw my daughter into the political world. And if there are any political reporters here and you want to ask me questions specific about her that are political in nature, sorry. But I specifically, if you look at those stories, I mostly went to Human Interest, People Magazine, because I wanted moms to see it.
Right.
And then they think, oh, I can advocate for my kid. And it's been amazing. It could be a very educated, wealthy mother. It could be a poor, single mom. And they both are like, they have the same fight. They just say, give me an avenue, help me. And parents know how to advocate for their kids. Sometimes they just need another person kind of standing next to them. That's been my experience.
That's a remarkable story. Well, that's all the time we have. Please thank the Congresswoman, and I'll hand it back to Diane.